Kamala Harris has reportedly co-opted a story told by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. about a little Black girl who was grabbed by police during a demonstration that she was walking in with her mother in 1965. Now, as Dr. King tells the story of what he saw when the cop grabbed the little 7 or 8-year-old Black girl and asked her what it was she wanted being out in this protest, the tiny little girl, facing the physical embodiment of the white supremacist system that she and her mother were marching to dismantle, responded to the racist cop who was manhandling her as if she were a criminal, that she wanted freedom. That's what Dr. King said. And he further said of the encounter that he witnessed, quote, she couldn't even pronounce it, freedom, the word, but she knew it was beautiful. Many times when I have been in sorely trying situations, the memory of that little one has come into my mind and it has buoyed me, end quote. That was what Dr. King said about what he saw with this little girl in this protest. So now the recently published Elle magazine interview in which writer Ashley C. Ford conveyed Kamala Harris's recollection of being pushed in a stroller during a civil rights march in Oakland, California, is eerily, horrifyingly, insultingly similar to Dr. King's story, with an interesting twist that only Kamala the Cop Harris could conjure up. Because for some reason, Harris felt the need to convey that the stroller she was in had no straps, so she wasn't buckled into it and she fell out of it, and that her parents and uncle didn't notice that she fell out and left poor little Kamala behind as they continued on the march. This doesn't put them in such a good light, but what do you expect from someone who thought locking up the parents of truant students was a good idea? The adults eventually noticed that Kamala wasn't in the stroller, according to her. And look, I'm not even a parent, and this makes no sense to me that you don't notice a whole child suddenly isn't in the stroller that you are pushing, but that's what she said. And when they went back and found her, her mother asked what she wanted, and traumatized and angry little Cam said to her irresponsible mama, freedom. That's what Kamala Harris said. Now, I have no idea why Harris thought Black Twitter wasn't going to catch this, but honestly, she has no reason to be concerned that they did, because Black voters let her get away with lying about smoking weed and listening to Tupac in college before he even put out any music, straight up saying that she wasn't going to do anything specifically and only for Black people, and they let her get away with this nauseating fake homegirl cadence that she speaks to Black voters with. Because this latest episode in 1001 Reasons Kamala Harris is Not One of Us is a prime example of the shallowness of representational politics. Now, I'm not talking about actual identity politics as defined by the Black feminist women of the Combahee River Collective in 1977, who coined the phrase in their efforts to address the political concerns of Black women, which they felt had been ignored by the larger feminist movement. The collective point out in their manifesto that, quote, if Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all systems of oppression, end quote, which frames identity politics as the focus on the ways in which oppressed people, in this case, Black women, are oppressed because we are Black and women, and forming strategies to dismantle the ways in which people of that identity are oppressed, targeting race, gender, and class oppression specifically. And this is done in coalition with other groups who also experience some form of these oppressions because of their identity. Black men experience race and class oppression. Gender nonconforming people experience gender and class oppression. Indigenous people experience race, gender, and class oppression. And yes, even poor white people experience class oppression. The idea behind identity politics is to destroy the systems of oppression that affect people because of their particular identity so that we can all be free. But for Black people who are unaware of the Combahee River Collective and the need to use politics to address the injustices committed against people because of their identities, we too often fall for what Harris and too many Democrats give us, which is representational politics, where the only thing that's addressed is having someone who represents, quite literally in physical form, the community that is seeking to have their needs met. And the problem is that representational politics doesn't provide advocacy for the actual issues of those people. It just provides a woman to be the first woman to fill a position, a Black person to be the first Black person to fill a position, a gay or trans person to be the first in whatever position they are. And because there are so few of some groups in positions of power and influence, because the identity politics of white cis people has made it that way, too many members of the groups represented are excited that one of them is in the door. But the politics of those people who might physically look like us do not actually reflect a move toward challenging the oppressions we face collectively and individually as identity groups, because we never get around to interrogating the identity politics of any of them. Why? Because the white cisgendered power structure has bastardized and demonized the idea of identity politics to ensure that we never do. We're afraid to adhere to the principles of identity politics because the people who don't want us to have told us it's bad. I mean, Kamala Harris herself said while rolling her neck, "I'm not going to do anything only for Black people," conveying instead that general policies will help all people and will be most beneficial for Black folks. And while a lot of people believe that this sounds good, it also completely avoids addressing those very issues of specific and unique oppressions against certain people because of their identities, which means that we might get a little relief generally, but none of us will ever really get free. And do you get how that no one who represents the system wants that to ever happen? So sure, the powers that be will gladly present to Black voters a Kamala Harris to whip up our emotional excitement in having a woman who looks like us as vice president and potential president, because while she might look like us, she's not one of us. And they and she know it. Her political values reflect the system she represents, not the people who the system needs to support her so they can put her in power to defend them. So she'll whip up this incredibly insulting fiction, inserting herself in Dr. King's story to make her seem to us like she's always been immersed in the struggle for freedom, when she knows doggone well she cares nothing about our actual liberation from this capitalist imperious juggernaut that she benefits from, because too many people have already given her a pass on refusing to prosecute Steve Mnuchin for his crimes in the mortgage crisis in California, for refusing to prosecute sexual abusers in the Catholic Church, but setting up a program to entrap sex workers, for criminalizing parents for their kids' school truancy, and for voting for every defense bill that funds endless war and imperialism around the globe in the Senate. We've already given her a pass on those things. Why should she care that we've called her out on her lie about her little protest story? We have to be very clear on the difference between valid identity politics and empty representational politics if we are serious about affecting any change in this political system. We have to stop letting the system and its agents rip us off with their Trojan horse of representation. Follow Luke Mon Nation on patreon.com/Luke Mon Nation for lots of great content.